we want to consider these two verses, Genesis 1:14 and 17. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." Now I want to open up Genesis. It's focusing on Genesis 1:14 through 19. I've just read two of those verses, but let's open our Bibles now to this section of Genesis 1 and read all of these verses dealing with this day of creation. 14 again states, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." Verse 15. "And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day." Now, we are going to proceed to the next slide. Before we get in to just what these verses are talking about, and I'm not the expert and I don't have all the answers, maybe we can help each other during this lesson. But before we move forward, I would like to consider Apollo 15, which occurred in 1971, and on this Apollo mission was James Irwin. After he came back, and splashed down, later he gave a talk to Russia, to people in Russia. And there's just one paragraph from this talk that I would like to share with you. He gives the whole story, and it's very interesting. But in the story of his experience, he states, "After leaving Earth's orbit, when the ship had become parallel to Earth, we saw our dear planet through the window of the spacecraft. It passed by magnificently and triumphantly beneath us. The view of it was stunning. The earth was illuminated by the sun, and we could see the individual continents and countries. We were able to distinguish the reddish hues of the earth, the light brown deserts and mountains, blue-green seas and oceans, and the white clouds." And so this is what he saw from Apollo 15 as he was leaving Earth's orbit, heading for the moon. And he saw this view of the continents, the countries, the hues of the earth, the deserts, the mountains, etc. Now, there's another mission, the Apollo 8, that took place a few years earlier in 1968 with 3 people on board, and it was the first crewed spacecraft to leave low Earth orbit and the first human space flight to reach the moon. The crew orbited the moon 10 times without landing and then departed safely back to Earth. And while they were there, this famous picture was taken. While they were in flight, this famous picture of what they called the Earthrise was taken, and you can see it here. On the below is the moonscape, and the Earth is rising, this blue ball. Very interesting. But I didn't read the part that I was hoping that that I really wanted to share. Let me see if from Erwin. He talks about, if I'm not mistaken, about as the further they went, the size of the earth decreased. In their window of the spacecraft, it was originally the size of a melon, and then it got smaller to the size of an orange, and then just a white dot in the blue and the black space about it. And that's what he saw, and perhaps I'm confusing the two between Apollo 8 and Apollo 15. But nevertheless, these astronauts were able to see this, and it made me think that even though it became just a little white dot in the black space about it, and just from a spacecraft close to the Earth, this little dot, this insignificant in some ways place in the vast universe, God has focused his attention upon. And it seemed like a dot to these astronauts. The universe is watching on. This small, small dot in the universe, the great controversy is taking place on. Now, as we consider these verses in Genesis 1 about day 4, I would like to first of all go back to Genesis 1:1 and go through the rest of the chapter and focus on the action words. We haven't really discussed the difference between when God created, or when God made, or when God gave something or blessed something. There are certain action words that are important in this chapter. The first one we find in Genesis 1, and God created the heaven and the earth, heavens and the earth. And that Hebrew word is bara, and the root denotes the concept of initiating something new. It's different from Asa, which means to fashion, in the latter primarily emphasizing the shaping of something. But bara starts from nothing. It's something that is initiated. The whole thing is initiated. God created. This idea of creation, and using that Hebrew word bara, means it's made from something new. It's not fashioning something that you already have. Like, maybe you've been a seamstress and sewed clothing. You already have the fabric and you're fashioning a garment, you see. But that's not what bara is. Bara is creating, initiating something brand new. Now in verse 3, we have this action word of said, and we see it a lot through the chapter. God said, "Let there be light." This is an action word in the sense that he said it and it happened. And that Hebrew word said is amar, and it just simply means what we think it means: to say something, to speak, even to command. So that's another action of God in creation. Then in verse 5, and we talked about this, I think, last week or the week before, when God called something, he named him. Adam also was involved in naming things, but God also named things. In verse 5, we read, "And God called the light day." That Hebrew word is quara, and it just means to enunciate something, to call something, or maybe to call out something. That's kind of straightforward. But then in verse 7, we get God made. God made the firmament. That Hebrew word made is asa. And I referred to it in the first when we talked about bara, also means to fashion, to do, or to make something. And it's different than creating something. Sometimes we have Moses explaining that God created and made at the same time, but it all has to do with God doing bara. And when he creates something, he might fashion it also. And we'll study more about that later. But then in verse 17, there's another action word. And in 17, God set them. That's part of what we're focusing on today, these lights. He set them. He did something. And that word set is Natan, or Natan, I should say Natan. And it means to give, and it's used 2,000 times about in the Old Testament. And it's translated to set, or to commit, or to put, or to lay, and many other ways it's used. But here in Genesis, it says that God set them. And the root word for set and commit and put and lay is Natan, and it means to give. God gave them, or set them, or put them in the firmament. Now in verse 22 we have this word blessed. It's another action of God in Genesis 1. And blessed, let's read verse 22. We haven't gotten there yet. But it's after he's made the mammals and the animals of verse 21. In verse 22, we have a new something that God does that he hasn't done before. He blesses them. He invokes them, or tells them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters. Well, yes, that's 22. I said the animals in 21, but it's the creatures in the waters. And so 22, God blessed them. Be fruitful and multiply. This is how he blessed them. He blessed them. He told them to be fruitful and multiply. Now, of course, the plants multiply. They have fruit, but God didn't bless them that we know of. It's not recorded until this time. And that blessing is from the Hebrew word barak. And in the Old Testament, this blessing means to endue with power for success, prosperity, fecundity, longevity, etc. And so I didn't include that when I was telling you about this blessing, this in giving something to you. And it means to give you power for success, prosperity, progeny, longevity, etc. So this is what's involved in the blessing, the barak, that's used here in Genesis 1. Now in 29, we have this Natan again. Let's just look at verse 29. Which states, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb. That's Natan. That's used earlier about setting them in the heavens. Remember these lights? Setting, giving. And here in 29, I have given you every herb. Then in 2:2, we have two more things, two more actions that God did. He ended and he rested. And ending is just what it means. It means to finish, to cease, to come to a full end. And resting is Shabbat, which also has that concept of ceasing, desisting from work and resting, Shabbat. So these are some of the action words that or the actions, I should say, that Moses describes in Genesis 1. God created, God fashioned, God spoke, God gave, God blessed, and after all this is done, he ended and rested. That's what we see happening here in Genesis 1. Going on. Now, let's look at verse 8. Back up to verse 8 in Genesis 1, which states, "And God called," here's another action, "God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." So the firmament is heaven. That's what he called it. So when we read about heaven later on, we're reading about the firmament. However, in verse 14, we have the two combined. We have the firmament of the heaven, rakia of Semaim. Those are the two Hebrew words, rakia for firmament and Semaim for heaven. And that's what's used in verse 8 also. He called the rakia Semaim. And then in verse 14 we read, "Let there be lights in the rakia of the Semaim." And then in verse 15, 14 says, "Lights in the firmament, the rakia of the Semaim." 15 says, "Lights in the rakia of the Semaim." And then in verse 17 we have, "Set them," or gave them, or put them in the rakia of the heavens. Now, this may not mean anything to you, but I'm a person of words, and I'm a person of logic, try to be. And these words do mean something. They're very important. And I just hate to keep bringing up some theories that are floating around in our Adventist community, but if you're literal, you have to acknowledge that the lights are put in the rakia. And we talked about rakia, some of the meanings it has of flattening out metal so that it's a covering for some of the sanctuary utensils. Flattening out, it's a hard substance, or could be, but gold is not hard, it's soft and malleable. And so if you're saying that things are of a certain dimension, or a certain shape, you have to realize that these lights, they're not in, if you follow that philosophy, they're not in the firmament, they're not in the heavens, they're in that rakia, which is understood to be the thin, if it's thin, or the firm covering of the heavens. So it doesn't make sense. And maybe this is why God has allowed this to be spoken or written in this way, in the firmament of the heaven. It's not in the rakia, and it's not, God is saying it's not just in the rakia, but it's in the firmament of the heaven. And so it can't be, these lights can't be placed in that thin, firm covering dome that covers the atmosphere. And still we can get to it by spacecraft, by the telescopes that are sent out and pictures are taken. Maybe it is not important to you, but that's what God says, the firmament, the rakia of the heaven. Now, signs. These are things for signs, seasons, days, and years. Now, this Hebrew word signs is ot, O-T, and it means a sign, a mark, a token, a warning even, a proof, or even a miraculous sign. Verse 14, the luminaries, these stars and these lights. 14, the word lights is or a form of or, and it means a luminary. These luminaries are meant to be signs. In Genesis 4:15, the same word is used in reference to Cain. And the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark, that's ought, on upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. Now we don't know. Maybe you know. I'm not aware, I don't think, of what that mark is. But he set an ought on Cain, so that no one would kill him. They would recognize that this sign on him. In 9:13, Genesis 9:13, we read about ought again. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token. This time it's translated token, but it's ought, a sign. It shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. So the rainbow is a sign. Then we move on to Genesis 17:11, where we read circumcision is a token. 17:11 states, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. That's ought, a sign. Exodus 31:31. You probably can tell me right now what sign we're talking about here. Exodus 31:13, I should say. I have that wrong. Let me just look. No, it's fine. Speaking thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign, an ought, between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Now we are called, or invoked, or told to worship God on the Sabbath, to keep the Sabbath holy. God promises to meet with us. I'll have the text later on. And he keeps his promise. And we come to him on the Sabbath day in a special way, honoring his command to keep it holy, to worship him, to remember him as the creator of all things. And he keeps his part. He doesn't relinquish or cancel his promise of Sabbath blessing. We need to do our part also and honor him on the seventh day, and that's what you're doing. It's true, we can't be face to face with each other during our Sabbath school. It's true that the blessing or the promise that I'm going to share with you later in Matthew, where two or more are gathered, God has promised to be there with them. Now we are gathered, but we're gathered through space, through this atmosphere, and we're not face to face, but God will meet with us. He's meeting with you right now where you are. If your heart is humble, and if you have asked forgiveness for your sins, if you are right with God, he's there with you. It's true, we are meeting virtually, but we are meeting, and he has promised to be with us. And so you can claim that promise for yourself, and I can claim it here, even though it's just Leon and me. And maybe it's just you, maybe it's you and a few others, But nevertheless, God will not break his promise. Let's not go to the extremes of how much we can get away with and still, quote unquote, keep the Sabbath holy. Ezekiel 21:12 is another good promise here. 21:12. Anyway, the Sabbath is ought. It's a sign. Most of the 80 occurrences of ought refer to miraculous signs. All the plagues of the Egyptians are called signs. And in these contexts, the complementary word moped, meaning wonders, often occurs. Signs and wonders. And we read about that in Ezekiel 7:3. No, Exodus 7:3. Which states, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt." That's ought. So, and we often hear signs and wonders gathered to put together in the same phrase. Now, remember, most of the uses of ought in the Old Testament refer to something miraculous. Let's look at Numbers 17:10. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony, to be kept for a token, ought, against the rebels, and thou shalt quite take away their murmurings from me, that they die not." This is when Aaron's rod budded and bloomed. And so God said, keep that as an ought against the rebellion that has cropped up, and against future rebellions also. Isaiah 7:11 states, "Ask thee a sign, ought, of the Lord thy God. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above." And so, and what was the sign? Going on to verse 14, "Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." So that's a miraculous sign being spoken of here. 2 Kings 20, verse 9 states, "And Israel said, This sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the things that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or go back 10 degrees? Another miraculous occurrence. So, this was a miraculous sign. Judges 6:17. "And he said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, then show me a sign that thou talkest with me." This is about Gideon, and a sign was given. And so this concept of ought is usually with something miraculous. And then Matthew 24 is the text I wanted to refer you to, about where 2 or 3 are gathered. Verse 29 states, 29 is not the text about 2 or 3. This is about miraculous signs in the heavens. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven be shaken." More signs, miraculous signs of the times going on. Now, the word seasons, the Hebrew word seasons that we read in Genesis 1, it is from the root ya'ad, and it means to appoint, to betroth, to assemble, to meet, to set. And in Genesis 1, in this verse, it is the noun form of this root verb that is moed. And moed can mean, the last paragraph here, the masculine noun occurs 223 times in the Old Testament. It frequently designates a determined place or time without regard to the purpose. It may be the time of the birth of a child, as we read in Genesis 17:21. And more text there. Or the coming of a plague, as in Exodus 9:5. It can refer, moed can refer to the season of a bird's migration in Jeremiah 8:7. Let's just look at that verse. Jeremiah 8:7 states, Yea, the stork in the heaven knoweth her appointed times, moed. And the turtle and the crane and the swallow observe the time of their coming, but my people know not the judgment of the Lord. And so moed can be applied even to birds, or it can be applied to an appointed time. And some of the texts are there, 1 Samuel 13:8. Or the time for which a vision is intended, Habakkuk 2:3. The times of the end, Daniel 8:19. Moed is used in all of these places, or the time of festivals. And that's where people meet. You see, it's a meeting, and it's an appointed time. Deuteronomy 31:10 has the translation of moed as solemnities. Let's just look at Deuteronomy 31:10. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity or the moed of the year of release, in the feast of tabernacles. And so it can be translated that way also. It means an appointed sign, an appointed time, an appointed season, a place of an assembly, or a set feast. And it can be an assembly of the general public, a large group of people, or it can be applied to just one person, like the Lord moed with Moses. He met with Moses at an appointed place, and it was just the two of them, you see. Or it can be applied to an assembly. Yearly returning festival periods and other definite times were to be regulated by the movement of celestial bodies. And I have Psalm 104:19 and Zechariah 8:19 there. These bodies have, moreover, a definite influence upon agriculture, navigation, human occupations, as well as upon the course of animal and vegetable life. For instance, the breeding time or moed of animals, the migration of birds. So moed isn't just solemn assemblies of the children of Israel, for example. It isn't just an appointed time between, like, Moses and God, two individuals. We have an appointed time, don't we? I don't know if it's moed, but it's the Sabbath. Every Sabbath, Brother Alan Yule always mentions we've come together on the best day of the week, an appointed time to meet with God. We are expected to worship God, and He's promised to meet with us, and God keeps His appointments. Let's make sure we keep our appointment with Him. And here is the text I was thinking of, Matthew 18:20. Let's read that. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. A beautiful promise. He promises to do that, and he keeps his promises. Let's keep our part also. Now, the Bible tells us the heavenly bodies, the things that God has set, remember, given, placed, put in the atmosphere, in the firmament of the heaven. The heavenly bodies are for determining the seasons. And if it's the noun, it could be moed. There are other versions of nouns for like moed. And each festival is a moed, yes. But not all moeds are festivals. That's the point I want you to remember, that just because it's called moed doesn't mean it's a sacred festival. It frequently designates, I've already said this, but to remind you, moed frequently designates a determined time or place, but without regard to the reason for this determined time. It may be the time of birth, or the season of a bird's migration, or an appointed time for some reason, or the vision, or etc. Now, Jerusalem, we are told in Isaiah 33:20. So let's check Isaiah 33:20. We are told that Jerusalem is the city of assemblies. Verse 20 states, "Look upon Zion, the city of our solemnities." Here again, moed is translated solemnities, the city of our festivals, our solemn times to worship together. Okay, Zion is called the city of our solemnities. We also read that something similar, Ezekiel 36:38. Which states, "As the holy flock, as the flock of Jerusalem, in her solemn feasts, so shall the waste cities be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am the Lord." But again we read about Jerusalem with her solemn feasts. She's the city of assemblies. Now, there's another presentation I'd like to share with you, and that's the 7 highlights of the solar system. Now, just let me get it going here. There we go. When and how the solar system, for example, was created, we are not told, but let's just consider some thoughts here. Early Writings 39. "Then I was taken to a world," Ellen White speaking, which had 7 moons. There I saw good old Enoch, who had been translated. On his right arm he bore a glorious palm, and on each leaf was written victory. Around his head was a dazzling white wreath, and leaves on the wreath, and in the middle of each leaf was written purity. And around the wreath were stones of various colors that shone brighter than the stars, and cast a reflection upon the letters and magnified them." Going on. "On the back part of his head was a bow that confined the wreath, and upon the bow was written holiness. Above the wreath was a lovely crown that shone brighter than the sun. I asked him if this was the place he was taken to from the earth. He said, "It is not. The city is my home, and I have come to visit this place." He moved about the place as if perfectly at home. I begged of my attending angel to let me remain in that place. I could not bear the thought of coming back to this dark world again. Then the angel said, "You must go back. And if you are faithful, you, with the 144,000, shall have the privilege of visiting all the worlds and viewing the handiwork of God." Now, I've introduced this slide presentation with these words because we are on the verge of the end of all things on this old world. And maybe you, and maybe me, maybe we want to be part of the 144,000. And if you are part of that group, you will have the privilege, we are told by the angel, of visiting these worlds and viewing the handiwork of God. Now, as far as this old world is concerned and the people on it, the people who are searching for knowledge, the solar system is about as close as they can get to start searching. But before I get to that part, consider these words from Desire of Ages 26. Our little world, under the curse of sin, the one dark blot in his glorious creation, will be honored above all other worlds in the universe of God. Here, where the Son of God tabernacled in humanity, where the King of glory lived and suffered and died, here, when he shall make all things new, the tabernacle of God shall be with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And through the endless ages, as the redeemed walk in the light of the Lord, they will praise him for his unspeakable gift, Emmanuel, God with us. And so our little world is the one dark blot in the whole universe, but God's going to remake it, and it's going to become the center, his dwelling place. He will dwell with us, and the tabernacle of God shall be with men here on the earth made new. Brothers and sisters, it's true we're suffering, some of us a lot more than others, but all of us will face suffering and deprivation in the future, if we are alive to see Jesus when he returns. But right now, some of us are suffering more than others. Some of us have more issues to deal with than others. But it will all change one day. It will be worth it all to be and stay faithful to the great creator of the universe, who made all things in this account in Genesis 1 for us. Let's go on. Now, in the 19th century, science frequently constituted an avenue to a deeper appreciation for the works of God. This is Gerald Colvin in an article he wrote for the Review. More than a few scientists studied nature to decipher a divine order. This is the 19th century, i.e. the 1800s. In the motions of the planets, early astronomers like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler sensed God's blueprint for the universe in the motion of the planets. When they studied and discovered things about how the planets moved, they sensed God's blueprint. Newton believed that in his uncovering the laws of motion and universal gravitation, God had granted him a glimpse into the very operating manual of the vast machine called creation. That's how science was working in the 1800s. Then we have the 1900s, and now the 2000 years of the 2000 century. And science has gotten further and further and further removed from understanding God as the great creator of all this. Not us, but the secular world has, but it wasn't so in the 1800s. What they discovered revealed the God of creation. Now, how and when God created the universe and the solar system, we do not know. He hasn't revealed that to us. We cannot say these things because God has not revealed them to us, but we can look into the things He has made and given us. So, as a result, we have biologists, botanists, astronomers, etc. And we continue to earnestly seek to understand creation and the origin of life as revealed to us in Scripture. We wish to learn as much in all realms as God will permit. Henry Schaefer, a past professor of chemistry and director of quantum chemistry at the University of Georgia, said that the significance and joy in his science came about in the occasional moments of discovering something new and saying to himself, "So that's how God did it." His goal was to understand God better. But most scientists are not that way. In 2007, this is data from 2007, so I'm sure it could be updated a lot. But traveling, even at 50,000 miles per hour, would take us almost 8.5 years to escape the solar system. That's more than 3.5 billion miles. The space station, this is 2007, circled the Earth at approximately 17,500 miles per hour, while space probes cruise past planets at only 27,345 miles per hour. Even at the speed of light, 5,000 years would pass before we could reach the outer rim of the Milky Way. That's how vast this space is, and I'm sure we have more detailed data now. Also 2007, two of our nearest neighboring galaxies, the Magellanic Clouds, are 170,000 light years away and contain 15 billion stars. Even more distant, at 2.2 million light years, is the Andromeda Galaxy, twice the size of the Milky Way, containing 250 billion stars. A little farther away is the galaxy M87, with 750 to 1,000 billion stars, and the galaxies here that are enumerated. If Adam had begun counting galaxies at 100 per minute, life on Earth has not existed long enough to count them all. That's the vastness of God's creation, and we only know what we can explore. We can't imagine what there is beyond going on. Astronomers classify galaxies that travel in groups as island universes, with our local island universe containing approximately 30 galaxies with some 10 trillion stars. Island universes are about 1,000,000 times farther apart than galaxies. If we were to continue out 50 million light years, we would leave just our island universe and encounter more island universes than are even countable. So, to just focus on the solar system, the little part of this grand universe that we are acquainted with somewhat, there are 7 interesting aspects of it that I'd like to share with you. The first are the icy plains of Pluto. And here's a picture of it. This is Pluto, and that smooth vanilla-covered plain is the icy plain. Now, why is it there? Why is this icy plain there where you can see the rest of Pluto has hills and valleys and mountains, but there's nothing showing in this icy plain? Why is it there? Well, the best we can do, and please realize I'm not stating any of this as fact, but it's the best we can understand right now, that it is possible heating in the core continues today in Pluto, creating a subsurface ocean of liquid so many kilometers thick at the core. In September 2016, scientists at Brown University simulated the impact thought to have formed it. An impact is believed right now, to the best of our knowledge, to have formed this plain. And it might have occurred because of liquid water upwelling from below the collision site, implying an existence of a subsurface ocean, at least 100 kilometers deep. And I put this in because, remember, in the beginning there was a surface of water, chaos, before God created the things he did on our earth. Water engulfed this earth. Now, and it wasn't just a placid lake of water. We're going to read more later on. Okay, but so Pluto, they think, may have a subsurface ocean. And that upwelling of that, because of an impact, had created this smooth, icy plain on Pluto. Pluto's surface is composed of nitrogen and methane ices and is made primarily of ice and rock. Compared to Earth's moon, Pluto is only 1/6 of the mass of the moon and 1/3 of the volume. It's a very small planetary substance out there. Now, the north polar region of Pluto's largest moon, Charon, is colored almost blood red, and I'll show you a picture of that. But you can see here in this picture of Pluto, outside of this icy plain is blood red something going on. And here's the next picture. Here's Pluto, the larger. The moon, also in the background, has this redness to it. But the next thing to consider, oh no, we have more. Pluto has a heart-shaped icy plain, roughly the color of vanilla ice cream, glaciers rolling through gaps in towering mountains, and possible ice volcanoes. We'll talk about volcanoes on these planetary substances in a minute. Here's a depiction of what they think Pluto is like. There's a water ice crust underneath the surface, and then a liquid water ocean and a silicate core. And here's a picture of Pluto with the sun backlighting it so that you can see the gases that are over the surface of Pluto. Now, another interesting part of the solar system are the tiger stripes of Enceladus, which is a moon of Saturn. And here's a picture of it coming up. It's a color-enhanced picture, but you can see it's like a tiger has tiger stripes is why they call it that. These stripes that are in Enceladus. And the Cassini probe took these pictures of Saturn's icy moon, Enceladus. These new views show 4 long dark lines crossing the moon's crust. Later observations revealed them to be fractures in the crust, flanked on each side by high ridges. These tiger stripes became even more fascinating when later flybys revealed huge plumes of water vapor hissing from the fractures, sending a mist of ice crystals skyward that would sparkle and glint. Now, we read earlier that if we are faithful and part of the 144,000, we will be able to explore other worlds that God has created. Today, people wish they were able to explore just these, and you'll see their globes, in our solar system, because we don't understand them. And if you are a person who likes to be adventurous or likes to explore, you might like to explore the solar system. And you might like to go here and see what these claw stripes are made of, why they're there. But now we know that huge plumes of water vapor is escaping through these fractures. Again, water is under the surface of Enceladus. What about the volcanoes of Io, which is a moon of Jupiter? I'm checking the time. We've got to hurry along. Here's colorful Io, and it's these colors, and these black spots are like, if I'm not mistaken, volcanoes of the 4 moons of Jupiter discovered by Galileo. Io is by far the most colorful and dramatic. The first Voyager images showed the moon was a bewildering variety of shades of yellow, orange, and red. Io is covered in sulfur that gushes, spurts, and sloshes from hundreds of volcanoes that are scattered across its surface. Io is Jupiter's 5th moon and the most volcanically active body in the solar system. Io's surface is peppered with hundreds of volcanoes, some spewing sulfurous plumes hundreds of miles high. Its surface temperature, this is what is interesting, is minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit, resulting in the formation of sulfur dioxide snowfields. But Io's volcanoes can reach 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Io is often referred to as a celestial body of fire and ice. Very interesting. You might want to, if it were possible, go there and check it out. But there's more. The Valles Marineris on Mars. And here's a composite picture of the Great Rift there. The Valles Marineris. I'm not saying that right, but let me tell you about it, and we'll hurry along. It's a rift valley in Mars, stretching 2,500 miles long, reaching depths of 4.5 miles, and it's so wide across that you would have to strain to see the other side. And it goes around, let's see, it stretches almost a quarter of Mars' circumference at the equator. Now, the rings of Saturn. You're all familiar with this, I'm sure. These beautiful rings of Saturn, swirling around the planet's equator. And if you will all notice, all of these are spheres or globes. The rings of Saturn reveal that the planet is spinning at a tilt. The Baltic giant rotates at a 26.7-degree angle relative to the plane in which it orbits the sun. So these rings help you to understand, help you to see that Saturn is tilted as it rotates. Saturn also hosts the most moons of any of the solar system planets, 83 moons. I'm trying to hurry. Jupiter's great red spot. Maybe you've heard of this. See this great red spot? I don't know why they call it a spot, because it's huge. It rises at least 8 kilometers above the surrounding clouds. Lightning bolts that could destroy a city crackle at its base in the lower clouds. Winds at the outer edge swirl at more than 400 kilometers an hour. The spot completes a full counterclockwise rotation every 7 days. The turbulence created by this megastorm is brutal, the sound deafening. At least 2 planets the size of Earth, and I've read 1.5 planets in another place, but nevertheless, 2 planets the size of Earth could fit inside this storm, which has been spinning in Jupiter's southern hemisphere at least 400 years, which I should tell you, it wasn't there earlier. But since about 400 years ago, it's been seen. It developed. We don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe you do. The Hubble telescope revealed detail of the clouds of this red spot in 2019. The reason the storm has continued to exist for centuries is that there is no planetary surface to provide friction. Circulating gas eddies persist for a very long time in the atmosphere because there's nothing to oppose their momentum. Infrared data indicates that the Great Red Spot is colder and thus higher in altitude than most of the other clouds on the planet. The upper atmosphere above the storm, however, has substantially higher temperatures than the rest of the planet. In other words, the planet has a certain surface temperature, but at the top of this red spot, it's warmer. And they weren't sure why. And of course, we can't go there and measure and look like a good researcher would, but research suggests that the storm produces extreme amounts of sound waves, which travel upwards to a height of 500 miles above the storm, where they break in the upper atmosphere, converting wave energy, these are sound waves going up, into heat. The effect is described as like ocean waves crashing on a beach. And if the stronger the wave, the more surf and breakage you see and sound going on. This suggests that Jupiter's Great Red Spot may be the mysterious heat source behind Jupiter's surprising upper atmospheric temperatures. Even though Jupiter's more than 5 times the distance from the sun as Earth is, the upper atmosphere temperatures are comparable to those here on Earth, our upper atmosphere temperatures. And here's a artist's depiction of the Great Red Spot and the sound waves going up and then crashing and from sound into heat. And there's a study of it there from NASA. I won't read it because we're running out of time. And is this the last one? Let me check. The geysers of Triton. And waiting. Triton is another moon, and you can see these black spots on Triton are geysers. things are slowing down. Here is a close-up. These are geysers. These are sending up substances. Now let's see if we can go on. The geysers of Triton are likely composed of nitrogen, frost, and organic compounds and eruptions that may last up to a year. Their presence is extraordinary because of its average temperature, Neptune's average temperature of minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Triton, Io, Venus are the only bodies in the solar system besides Earth that are known to be volcanically active. And I'll have to stop there. I just can't take more time. But God is great. God, and this is just a few of the things we know about our solar system. Now remember, we don't know how it was made, because creation is about Earth. And creation is, on day 4, is the sun and the moon and stars. And I wanted to tell you that phrase, let me get it, in Genesis 1:16. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. He made is added. In the Hebrew, it simply reads, and the lesser light to rule the night, the stars also. And so, just so you can understand a little bit as you study, he made the sun, the moon, the stars also. But the stars also were to rule the night. That's in that phrase, just for information's sake. But we don't know about the solar system. We don't know about Neptune, Uranus, Venus, Mars, etc. That's not told us in the creation story. On day 4, sun, moon, and the stars to give light at night. And I'll have to stop there. We'll go back to it next time, Lord willing. God bless you.